As we get right back into the Bible study here in Mark 15, we're moving on down to the final hours that Jesus was there on the cross. And in verse 33 says that it was the 6th hour, and darkness came there for those 3 hours until the 9th hour. And then at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, verse 34, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is, being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now, we're familiar with that. Many of us would have heard of that one of the statements. Probably many of us familiar with all 7 to some extent. But this is one of those that Jesus uttered there on the cross. And I was thinking about this. If you move down just a little bit further, there's an interesting parallel, or maybe even almost inverse parallel or something, however you'd want to say that. Go down to verse 38. So now we're at Mark 15:38, and it says, And the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. Now, what I want to share with you today is the distinction between those two, where they're, in a sense, you might say opposites, because when mankind sinned, obviously, now we wouldn't say that we're forsaken, because obviously God was still reaching out to us and over dealing with us. But in a sense, we might say that sin separated us from God. And so when we read this, we see that that now Jesus feels, in a sense, separated from God. Why hast thou forsaken me? But at the same time that Jesus died, feeling, in a sense, forsaken, we can understand that as he had taken on all the sin of mankind, that he would have felt perhaps forsaken, because sin does separate us from God. But at that time, when Jesus was feeling that forsaken burden there in his final moments, then when he gave up the ghost, verse 37 refers to it that way, when he died, then the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And when we read those words, we start seeing that as Jesus took our separation and felt that being forsaken there, as he described it, as he felt that, we suddenly belonged. We suddenly were able to come. We suddenly could go right in to God's presence because he was forsaken. And so for me anyway, there's such a beautiful, again, whatever you would want to call it, a contrast there, that for all these generations, mankind was separated, and now suddenly we're welcomed. But in the process, Jesus also had to suffer that same sort of separation from God, the Father. And what a beautiful thing that he was the one that bridged the gap. You've probably heard the example there of how suspended there between earth and heaven, in a sense, as Jesus is on the cross, he reaches out to the Father with one hand and reaches out to mankind with the other hand and draws us together. And so what a beautiful thing to recognize. And to me, I would probably say that one of the most beautiful parts of the story of the cross and of Jesus' sacrifice for us is right there in verse 38, when the veil of the temple is rent. And God says, you can come. It's not through the priest anymore. It's not through your own merits or whatever else you may want to say. It is through the blood of Jesus. He has brought us into that throne room or the place of worship, the place where we can come boldly before the throne of grace, as Hebrews tells us. And what a wonderful thing that is. But you see that distinction there. And I hope that maybe somehow, even in the years to come, maybe, if you read that statement, and as Jesus says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Remember that at the same time we can say, my God, you have welcomed me. and thank Jesus, thank God for the plan of salvation that allows us to come boldly, and we can bring our very souls to the throne of grace, and God sees us through the sacrifice of Jesus. Obviously, that was for that moment, and he's now ascended and on the right hand of the Father. But what a wonderful thing to know that we are now welcomed into his presence. And I hope you'll meditate on that this week and rejoice that Jesus made the way, opened up the way for you and I to come.